Get your things and be out before Ethan gets back, my mother-in-law said, standing in my foyer like she owned every square foot beneath her sensible shoes. I had just walked in with 2 grocery bags cutting red lines into my fingers, the late afternoon sun spilling across the hardwood floors I had picked out myself 3 years earlier. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. Margaret Bennett was 68, perfectly coiffed, wrapped in a cream cardigan that somehow made her look softer than she was, and she was pointing at my front door with the kind of calm authority people use when they think they can't be challenged. I set the bags down slowly on the entry table. One of them tipped, and a carton of eggs rolled gently against a bowl of lemons. "Excuse me," I asked, because sometimes the most dangerous people say outrageous things in the politest tone. Margaret folded her arms. "You heard me, Claire. This little arrangement is over. Ethan needs peace, and you've brought nothing but tension into this family. Pack a bag. Take the rest later. I'm being generous." She said generous like she was doing charity work. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the grandfather clock in the hallway, ticking away the last few minutes of her fantasy. My husband had flown to Chicago that morning for a 3-day work trip, and apparently Margaret had decided that the second his plane left the runway, I stopped belonging here. I looked past her into the living room. My throw blanket was folded over the sofa. My coffee mug still sat on the coaster beside the lamp. A framed wedding photo of Ethan and me smiled from the mantel, the 2 of us barefoot on a beach in South Carolina, laughing into the wind, like people who believed love could solve anything if you were patient enough. Margaret followed my gaze and gave a tight little smile. "Don't make this uglier than it has to be." That was the moment something inside me went still. Not shattered, not broken, just still. Because women like Margaret count on noise. They count on tears, raised voices, panic, pleading. They need you emotional so they can look composed. They need you scrambling so they can keep pretending they're in control. I didn't give her any of that. I reached into the grocery bag, pulled out the gallon of milk, and carried it into the kitchen. I heard her heels click behind me, sharp and impatient. "Are you even listening?" she snapped. I opened the fridge, set the milk on the top shelf, and closed the door with more care than the moment deserved. Then I turned and leaned lightly against the counter. "I'm listening," I said. "I'm just trying to understand why you think you can throw me out of my own house." She actually laughed. A short, brittle sound. "Your house?" she said. "Sweetheart, this is my son's house. You've been living here because he allows it." "Sweetheart." I almost smiled then. Almost. Because right there, in the bright white kitchen I had painted myself while she was still criticizing my curtain choices from 2 zip codes away, Margaret made the one mistake she couldn't talk her way out of. She thought marriage made me temporary. She thought family blood outrank paperwork. She thought if she sounded certain enough, the truth would bend to match her. But it wouldn't. And in exactly a few more minutes, she was going to learn something she should have asked about before she tried to put me on the curb. She kept pointing at the door like I was a guest in my own life. She forgot whose name was on the deed. Margaret stared at me for a long moment, as if she was waiting for me to laugh and admit I had made a joke she did not understand. When I did not, her expression hardened into something colder, thinner, more dangerous. "Do not play games with me, Claire," she said. "I have been in this family longer than you have, and I know exactly how things work." That almost made me laugh, but I kept my face still. People like Margaret heard laughter as disrespect. Silence unsettled them more. She had moved into our home 8 months earlier after what Ethan had gently called a health scare, though the doctor at Mercy General had described it as mild exhaustion, elevated blood pressure, and too much pride wrapped in too little rest. Ethan had panicked the second he got the call. He had insisted she should not stay alone in her condo across town, not while she was recovering, not while winter was coming, not while he could offer her a guest suite with a private bathroom and a heated blanket I ordered the same night. I had agreed before he even finished asking. That was the thing about me back then. I still believed kindness would be recognized if I gave it enough time. I cleared out my home office so she could have the downstairs room because the stairs felt too risky. I labeled her medication in a weekly organizer because she said the print on the bottles was too small. I learned exactly how she liked her tea. 2 slices of lemon, no sugar, water just under boiling, because she claimed oversteeped tea was what lazy women served. I drove her to appointments, sat in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and old magazines, and listen while she told every nurse within earshot that her son had rescued her. Not us. Not Ethan and Claire. Her son. At first, I told myself it was generational. Then it became a pattern. She started small, the way ivy creeps up a wall before you realize it is covering the brick. She moved the family photos in the hallway, shifting our wedding portrait from the center table to a lower shelf beside a ceramic lamp. She replaced the hand soap in the kitchen with the lavender kind she liked, and said my citrus brand smelled cheap. She told the woman at the church bake sale that she was finally helping Ethan keep some order in his house. She corrected me when I answered the front door. She interrupted me when I spoke to contractors. She once handed me my own grocery list and told me not to forget her yogurt this time, even though I had been the one paying for every carton in that refrigerator since the day she arrived. Ethan noticed none of it. Or maybe he noticed and chose the version of peace that cost him the least. She does not mean it that way, he would say while loosening his tie in our bedroom, exhausted from another 12-hour day at the office. She is old-fashioned. Or my personal favorite. Can you just let this one go? I let a lot go. The comments. The corrections. The way she said my son, like I was a temporary inconvenience he would eventually outgrow. But standing there in my kitchen with her arms crossed and my groceries still half unpacked, I realized none of those little moments had been random. They had been rehearsal. Every jab, every dismissal, every time she made me smaller in my own home. Margaret had not snapped. She had been building to this. And now, with Ethan 2 states away and no witness except the ticking clock and the cold certainty settling in my chest, she had finally decided it was time to stop pretending. Margaret took one slow step closer, the way people do when they believe proximity can replace authority. I was trying to spare you a scene, she said, her voice dropping into that soft, dangerous register she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. But if you insist on being difficult, then let me be perfectly clear. Ethan has been unhappy for a long time. There it was. Not just eviction. Narrative. She was not simply trying to push me out of the house. She was trying to rewrite the story of my marriage while my husband was in a hotel room nearly 1,000 miles away. I tilted my head slightly. That is interesting, I said. Because Ethan and I had dinner together last night, and he kissed me goodbye at the airport this morning. Her lips tightened. Do not be naive. Men do what is easy until someone reminds them what they deserve. I had heard versions of that sentence before, tucked inside smaller insults over the past year. When Ethan worked late, she would say, a man should want to come home. When I ordered takeout after a long day, she would sigh and mention the roast chicken she used to make every Thursday when Ethan was a boy. When he forgot to call her back, somehow that became my fault too. I was too independent, too career-minded, too direct, too modern. She once told her bridge club friend, right in front of me, that women like me treated marriage like a roommate agreement with tax benefits. I had smiled, handed out lemon bars, and said nothing. But now she was standing in my kitchen trying to weaponize my husband's silence, and I could feel the shape of the whole pattern at once. Ethan had not become distant because he wanted me gone. He had become careful because he hated conflict and had spent his whole life learning that the fastest way to end it was to give Margaret whatever version of reality she preferred. You should be grateful I am handling this privately, she continued. If Ethan had his way, he would drag this out. He is too soft-hearted. I am not. I folded my hands loosely in front of me. Handling what exactly? She glanced toward the hallway and then back at me with a little flicker of satisfaction. I packed one suitcase for you already. Just the essentials. I assumed you would not want me touching the rest. For one second, I actually thought I had misheard her again. You what? Guest room closet, she said. I did you the courtesy of choosing practical things. Comfortable shoes. Sweaters. Toiletries. You can come back for the rest when Ethan is home and emotions are lower. She said emotions like mine were the problem, even though I had not raised my voice once. I walked past her, my pulse steady in that strange way it gets when anger becomes clarity. She followed me down the hall, talking the whole time, each word brighter, sharper, more triumphant now that she thought she had forced me into motion. There is no need to be dramatic, Claire. You are still young. You can start over. Plenty of women do. Maybe this will be good for you. I stopped at the open door of the guest room. My old office. Her room now. And there, sitting neatly on the floral bench I had bought at a consignment shop in Charleston during our second anniversary trip, was a navy suitcase. My suitcase. Zipped. Ready. She had touched my clothes. My passport pouch. The silver-framed photo of Ethan and me from our first Christmas in the house was missing from the dresser. The room smelled faintly of her rose hand lotion and cedar sachets. For the first time that afternoon, something hot and sharp flickered under my ribs. Not panic. Not humiliation. Recognition. This had not started today. This had been planned down to the folded sweaters. And Margaret Bennett had just crossed the one line she should have been smart enough to leave alone. I did not touch the suitcase right away. I just stood there looking at it, my hands loose at my sides, while Margaret hovered in the doorway behind me like a woman admiring a job already finished. "You should thank me," she said. "Most women would have made this messier." I let my eyes travel over every detail instead. The navy case with the scuffed wool Ethan had promised to replace. The pale gray cardigan folded on top because she had always thought I looked less severe in lighter colors. My toiletry bag zipped with military precision. Even my phone charger coiled neatly in the side pocket. She had not packed in anger. She had packed with the confidence of someone who had spent days imagining this exact moment. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked quietly. That question landed harder than anything louder would have. Margaret shifted her weight, just slightly. "I have been preparing for the inevitable," she said. "There is a difference." I turned then and looked directly at her. "No," I said. "There really is not." She opened her mouth, but I walked past her before she could keep performing. Back into the hallway. Back toward the kitchen. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had decided to stop pretending. I noticed things I had ignored for months. The ceramic rooster cookie jar my aunt gave us at our housewarming was gone from the counter, replaced by a blue and white ginger jar from Margaret's condo. The linen hand towels with my initials had been swapped for thick beige ones she called more mature. The bowl by the entry where Ethan always dropped his keys had been moved 6 inches to the left because she said the sunlight made the brass fade. None of it mattered on its own. Together, it told a story. She had not simply moved in. She had been replacing me in pieces, one harmless adjustment at a time, until the day she could stand in the center of my kitchen and claim the whole thing with a straight face. I opened the refrigerator and started putting away the rest of the groceries. The eggs on the middle shelf. The orange juice beside the almond milk. Strawberries in the produce drawer. Margaret followed me, clearly irritated now that I was not spiraling. "Are you really unloading groceries at a time like this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "The ice cream is melting." She made a sound of disbelief. "You are impossible." I almost told her that was rich coming from a woman who had packed another adult's suitcase in secret and called it mercy, but I was not interested in scoring points. I was interested in facts. Cold ones. Useful ones. My mind had already moved past the insult and into sequence. Ethan was in Chicago until Friday. It was Wednesday, a little after 4. Margaret had prepared the suitcase before I got home, which meant she expected me to leave quickly, possibly before dinner, possibly before anyone else could see how far she had gone. That meant she did not want witnesses yet. Not because she doubted herself, because she thought timing was everything. Fine. Timing mattered to me too. I reached for my phone on the counter. Margaret's voice sharpened instantly. "Who are you calling?" "No one you need to worry about," I said, though that was not entirely true. She moved closer. "You are not going to embarrass Ethan while he is away." I looked at the screen, my thumb hovering over a name I had not needed in nearly 2 years. Daniel Reeves, the attorney who handled our refinance. The man who had slid a stack of papers across a polished oak desk and said, in a calm, practical voice, that asset protection was not about distrust. It was about foresight. Back then, Ethan had signed without hesitation. I had signed because he asked me to. Neither of us thought his mother would ever become the reason those papers mattered. I set the phone down without dialing. Not yet. Margaret was watching too closely. Let her keep talking. Let her keep believing certainty was the same thing as power. The most dangerous mistake she had made was not packing my suitcase. It was assuming I still needed her permission to stay. Margaret stayed in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded, watching me the way a cat watches a bird feeder, patient and smug, and absolutely certain the outcome belonged to her. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "If you leave now, Ethan can come home to calm, not conflict. That would be the decent thing." I put the carton of strawberries in the drawer and closed it gently. "Decent," I repeated, tasting the word. "That is an interesting choice." Her jaw tightened. Do not twist my words. But I was not twisting anything. I was lining up pieces that had already been there. 2 years earlier, Ethan's company had landed its biggest contract yet. A software logistics deal with a regional shipping chain that sounded glamorous until the legal notices started arriving. Nothing catastrophic, just the kind of business mess that comes when a fast-growing company hires too quickly, signs too much, and trusts the wrong consultant. There had been a dispute over deliverables, then another over liability, then a long week where Ethan barely slept and spent more time staring at spreadsheets than eating dinner. I still remembered the hollow look in his eyes when he came home one Thursday and said, "If this goes sideways, I need to make sure it does not touch the house." That was how we ended up in Daniel Reeves's office on a rainy Monday morning, coffee in paper cups, sitting across from a man with silver-framed glasses and a navy tie who spoke in clean, practical sentences. He explained asset protection the way a good attorney explains everything, without drama, without mystery. "This is not about distrust," he said. "This is about separating personal shelter from business exposure." Ethan nodded before Daniel even finished. The refinance paperwork was not romantic. It was not symbolic. It was just smart. The title changed. The deed was updated. My name went on it because I had the cleaner credit profile, fewer liabilities, and no ownership stake in the company. At the time, it felt like paperwork. Important paperwork, yes, but still just paperwork. We signed, initialed, notarized, and drove home in silence, the windshield wipers beating out a tired little rhythm while Ethan reached over at a red light and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me." I had laughed softly and told him marriage was basically a long series of signatures and takeout dinners under pressure. We survived the business scare. The contract dispute settled 6 months later. Life moved on. The papers went into the fireproof safe in the upstairs closet, then digital copies into a folder Daniel insisted we keep backed up. Margaret had been at Sunday lunch the week after the closing. She complained about the salad dressing, asked Ethan why he looked tired, and spent 20 minutes talking about a woman at church whose son let his wife handle too much. She had no idea where we had been the previous Monday. She had never asked. That was Margaret in a sentence. She assumed she knew everything because she knew the family name. She thought blood was a legal document. She thought motherhood gave her permanent access to every locked door in her son's life. "You can stop staring at your phone," she said now, mistaking my silence for hesitation. "I already told you. Ethan does not need to be bothered with this while he is traveling." I looked up at her and finally smiled, just a little. Not because anything about this was funny. Because for the first time all afternoon, I knew exactly where the ground was beneath my feet. "You are right," I said. "Ethan does not need to be bothered. Not yet." She mistook that for surrender. I could see it in the way her shoulders relaxed, in the tiny victorious lift of her chin. Let her. The most useful thing a person like Margaret can do is keep underestimating the woman standing in front of her. She thought I was stalling because I was scared. I was stalling because timing, as she had so kindly demonstrated, was everything. Margaret must have sensed that she had not gotten the reaction she wanted, because she changed tactics almost immediately. People like her always do. When intimidation does not work, they reach for an audience. She straightened her cardigan, smoothed one hand over her silver blonde hair, and said in a bright, almost cheerful voice, "Well then, since you are insisting on making this awkward, I suppose we should have someone here to avoid misunderstandings." Before I could answer, she was already walking toward the entry table where she had left her phone charging beside the bowl of keys she had spent months pretending belonged naturally to her. I kept my face neutral and continued wiping down the kitchen counter with a dish towel, slow and methodical, while she tapped out a text with the brisk confidence of a woman sending invitations to her own coronation. "Who did you invite?" I asked, not because I needed the information, but because tone matters. Calm questions make reckless people feel safe enough to keep talking. "Linda Foster," she said without looking up. She was already on her way back from the pharmacy. "She can witness that you are leaving voluntarily, which will save everyone trouble later." There it was. Not just humiliation. Documentation. Or at least her homemade version of it. Linda lived 3 houses down in a white Cape Cod with blue shutters and a porch full of ferns she somehow kept alive through every season. She was one of those neighborhood women who knew everybody's dog's name and always brought a casserole if someone had surgery. Harmless, kind, observant. Margaret had likely chosen her because she looked credible. You called a neighbor to watch me leave? I asked. Margaret finally looked up, and for the first time all afternoon, there was a flicker of impatience in her eyes. I called a respectable witness. There is a difference. I nodded once, like that made perfect sense. Of course. 20 minutes later, Linda's SUV pulled into the driveway, tires crunching lightly over the gravel border Ethan had insisted made the front landscaping look more polished. Margaret was already in the foyer by then, standing beside the Navy suitcase like a hotel manager at checkout. She had even moved 2 cardboard boxes near the front door. I had not seen her bring them down from the attic, but there they were now, one labeled winter and the other kitchen in my own handwriting from our move into this house. Empty, but symbolic. A little stage set for a story she had written in her head. I stayed in the kitchen, visible from the foyer, rinsing a coffee mug I had not used. Linda stepped inside with a polite smile that faltered almost instantly when she took in the suitcase, the boxes, and Margaret's expression. Oh, she said. I did not realize you all were in the middle of something. Nothing dramatic, Margaret said, too quickly. Claire and Ethan have decided some space would be healthiest. She is just gathering a few things while he is away. Linda's eyes moved to me. Claire, she asked gently, is everything all right? I dried the mug carefully and set it on the rack. That depends on how much truth matters today, I said. Margaret made a sharp little sound, halfway between a laugh and a warning. Please do not start, she said. No one is forcing anyone. Claire knows this is what is best. Then, because arrogance always gets greedy, she added, she will be gone before Ethan's plane even lands on Friday. Linda blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I could almost see the moment discomfort turned into concern. Good. Let her hear it clearly. Let there be no confusion later about what Margaret believed she was doing. I walked to the counter, picked up my phone, and unlocked it with my thumb. Margaret's smile thinned. Who are you calling now? She asked. I looked at her, then at Linda, then back at the suitcase by the door. Someone who actually knows whose house this is, I said, and this time, I did not wait. I barely let the first ring finish before Daniel Reeves answered. Claire, he said, his voice calm, measured, exactly the same as it had been in that oak-paneled office 2 years earlier. Everything all right? That depends, I said, keeping my tone level. How quickly can you confirm ownership of my house on speakerphone? There was a pause. Not confusion, just legal caution arranging itself. Do I need to be concerned? He asked. My mother-in-law is attempting to remove me from the property while my husband is out of town, I said. She has packed my belongings, called a neighbor as a witness, and is insisting I leave voluntarily. Linda's face changed at the word witness. Margaret's changed at the phrase my house. That is absurd, Margaret snapped from the foyer. This is my son's home. Put that man off speaker. I ignored her and tapped the button anyway. Daniel's voice filled the kitchen, clean and unmistakable. Mrs. Bennett, if this is what you are telling me, no one should be removing anyone until ownership is clarified. Margaret stepped into the kitchen then, chin high, smile thin and furious. There is nothing to clarify, she said loudly. My son Ethan Bennett owns this house. His wife is leaving. That is all. Daniel did not rise to her tone. Good attorneys rarely do. Ma'am, he said, I do not discuss client records casually, but if Claire Bennett is authorizing me to confirm title status related to her current occupancy, I can do that. I am authorizing it, I said. My voice sounded almost strange to me then. Not louder, just steadier than the room deserved. Daniel exhaled softly, the sound of someone already opening a file. Give me 10 seconds. The house went still in a way I will never forget. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed louder. Linda stood just inside the kitchen, clutching her purse strap with both hands. Margaret remained near the island, one manicured hand flat against the granite, her expression hovering somewhere between disbelief and irritation. I knew that look. It was the look she wore whenever reality failed to cooperate quickly enough. Then Daniel came back. I am looking at the recorded deed and title documents now, he said. The property located on Hawthorne Lane is titled solely in the name of Claire Bennett. Silence. Not dramatic silence. Not cinematic silence. Just the blunt, ugly kind that drops into a room when someone's certainty dies in public. Margaret blinked once, then twice. That is not possible, she said. You are mistaken. I am not, Daniel replied. The title was updated during the refinance approximately 2 years ago. It was properly executed, notarized, and recorded with the county. Claire Bennett is the sole titled owner of the property. Linda's eyes moved from Margaret to me so fast, it almost made me dizzy. Margaret gave a short, brittle laugh. Well, Ethan would never have allowed that. Daniel answered before I could. Mrs. Bennett, Ethan Bennett signed the related refinance documents. There is no ambiguity in the record. I watched the color drain from Margaret's face in slow increments, like someone dimming a light. Not gone all at once, just reduced. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. That does not mean she can just, actually, Daniel said, still maddeningly polite. It means she can remain in her home, and anyone attempting to pressure her into leaving may be creating a legal problem for themselves, especially if there are witnesses. Linda looked down immediately, as if she had accidentally stepped into church gossip and landed in a deposition. Margaret's hand slipped off the counter. The performance was over. No audience could save her now. I picked up the navy suitcase by the handle, rolled it 2 feet across the tile, and set it gently beside the breakfast nook. Then I looked directly at my mother-in-law and said the one thing she should have asked before she touched a single one of my sweaters. You should have checked the paperwork first. Daniel stayed on the line just long enough to ask if I wanted him to email the recorded deed again, and I told him yes, please, to both my email and Ethan's. Done, he said. If you need anything further, call me before this escalates. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. When the call ended, the kitchen seemed brighter somehow, as if the truth had changed the light. Margaret stood perfectly still near the island, but it was not composure anymore. It was recalculation. I had seen that look before too. It was the face of a woman searching for a version of events that still left her in control. This is ridiculous, she said finally, but the force had gone out of the words. Ethan would never keep something like that from me. Linda shifted awkwardly near the doorway. Maybe I should go, she said, voice small, polite, eager to escape. No, I said, still looking at Margaret. Please stay one more minute. Linda froze. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You do not get to order people around in front of me, she snapped. But even that sounded weaker than before, like a line from a play after the audience has stopped believing in the set. I set my phone on the counter and folded my hands. I am not ordering anyone around, I said. I am clarifying what happens next. Then I looked at Linda. You were invited here to witness me leaving voluntarily. Instead, you just witnessed my mother-in-law attempt to force the legal homeowner out of her own house while my husband is out of state. Linda swallowed hard and nodded once. Ah, yes, I suppose I did. Margaret turned toward her so quickly the movement almost felt theatrical. Do not be absurd, Linda. I was trying to help my son. By packing my clothes? I asked. By staging boxes at the front door? By telling the neighborhood I would be gone before Friday? Her mouth tightened. You are twisting everything. No, I said. I am done untwisting it. That landed. Harder than the legal call, in some ways. Because the deed settled ownership, but this was about something she had counted on for months. My silence. My willingness to smooth things over. My habit of protecting Ethan from discomfort by absorbing it myself. She had mistaken patience for weakness. So had he, if I was being honest. My phone buzzed on the counter. Ethan. Of course. Daniel must have sent the documents fast. I looked at the screen for half a second before answering on speaker. Claire. Ethan said, breathless, confused. Why did Daniel just email me a deed and a note saying I need to call home immediately? I kept my voice calm. Because your mother packed a suitcase for me, called Linda over as a witness, and informed me I would be out of the house before you landed on Friday. Silence on the line. Then what? Margaret stepped forward. Ethan, do not let her dramatize this. Mom, he said sharply, and the shock on her face would have been almost satisfying if it had not come so late. In 10 years of marriage, I had heard him use that tone with her exactly twice. Did you pack Claire's things? He asked. Margaret drew herself up. I did what you were too weak to do. That woman has turned you against your own family. Linda made the tiniest sound under her breath. Ethan did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower. Tighter. Claire, he said, put me on video. I switched the call, and his face appeared on the screen, airport lighting harsh above him, suit jacket over one arm, jaw set in a way I had not seen in a long time. He looked at the suitcase, the boxes, his mother. Then he looked at me. "No one is going anywhere tonight," he said. "And when I get home, this ends." I held his gaze for 1 second longer than necessary, then set the phone upright against the fruit bowl. "Good," I said, "because for once, it is not just about the house." The line stayed quiet for a second after I said that, and in that silence I could almost hear the version of our marriage we had both been living in crack down the middle. Not because Ethan did not love me. He did. But love without boundaries is just politeness wearing a wedding ring, and I was done mistaking one for the other. "I am booking the first flight back," he said finally, his voice clipped and flat in the way it got when he was angry enough to become precise. "Mom, sit down and do not touch anything else. Claire, do not leave the house. I will be there tonight." Margaret gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You are seriously taking her side over your own mother?" Ethan did not blink on the screen. "I am taking the side of the person you tried to remove from her own home." That word landed in the room like a gavel. Her own, not ours, not mine, not the family's. Hers. For the first time all day, Margaret looked old instead of powerful. Not fragile, just suddenly aware that age and authority were not the same thing. Linda cleared her throat softly. "I think I really should go now." This time, I nodded. "Thank you for staying." She gave me a look that held embarrassment, sympathy, and a kind of stunned respect, then slipped out the front door with the careful speed of a woman who knew she would be telling her husband every detail before dinner. The door clicked shut. The house felt different immediately, stripped of audience and performance. Just the three of us now. Me, my husband on a phone propped against a fruit bowl, and the woman who had spent 8 months rearranging my home until she believed she had the right to rearrange my life. I turned to Margaret. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. She opened her mouth, but I raised one hand, not dramatically, just enough to mark the boundary. "No, you have spoken all afternoon. Now you listen." Ethan said nothing. That mattered more than if he had agreed out loud. "You are not being thrown out tonight," I said. "I am not doing to you what you tried to do to me. But this arrangement is over. You will stay in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow morning, Ethan and I will decide whether you are returning to your condo or moving somewhere else temporarily. If you touch my belongings again, call another witness, or tell one more person I am leaving this house, I will ask Daniel to begin a formal notice process. And this time, it will be in writing." Margaret stared at me like she did not recognize the woman standing in front of her. Maybe she did not. The version of me she had built her little empire around was quiet, accommodating, eager to keep peace at any cost. That woman had unpacked her tea, labeled her medicine, and smiled through every insult. This woman knew exactly where the deed was, exactly what the law said, and exactly how much damage silence had already done. "You cannot speak to me like that," she whispered. "Actually," I said, "I can, because this is my house. But more importantly, I should have started months ago." On the screen, Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment, the truth of that hitting him too. When he looked back up, something in his face had changed. Shame, yes, but also resolve. "Claire is right," he said quietly. "Mom, when I get home, you are packing your own suitcase." Margaret's chin trembled once, barely visible, but she said nothing. There was no speech left that could save her now. Just consequences. Ethan landed just after 10 that night. He came through the front door with a small carry-on and the exhausted look of a man who had finally realized how much his convenience had cost everyone else. He hugged me first. That mattered too. Not because it fixed anything. It did not. But because for the first time in a long time, he chose clearly, immediately, and without asking me to make it easier for him. By noon the next day, Margaret was back at her condo with 2 overnight bags, a list of assisted move options Ethan had printed, and the understanding that if she wanted a relationship with us going forward, it would happen with rules, not assumptions. Therapy started for Ethan and me 3 weeks later. Boundaries started that same afternoon. The ginger jar disappeared. My framed photo went back on the dresser. The bowl by the door returned to its original spot. Tiny things, maybe, but homes are made of tiny things. So are marriages. Margaret thought she could remove me by acting like I was temporary. She forgot something important. Names matter. Signatures matter. But the real mistake she made was assuming the woman who built the life inside these walls would ever let someone else decide she no longer belonged there.